what I'd like to start off with is just asking, what is the question that ethics or moral philosophy is trying to answer, right? What is the ethicist trying to figure out or answer, or question are we addressing? And the Kantian is really going to say it's important that we understand what question it is that we're trying to answer. And the question that Kantian is going to say we're trying to answer is, as a free will, as a person who confronts many different options about what to do, and I'm thinking, is there anything I should do? Is there anything that's the right choice to make as opposed to the wrong choice, right? So ethics is in particular addressing somebody who is confronting choices and has multiple options and is trying to make the right one, which they are going to then choose and carry out, right? So we're not writing an ethics for rocks that just sit there. We're not writing an ethics for somebody who's totally out of control and in the frenzy of some sort of drug, heroin addiction and can't control themselves, right? It has to be somebody who's going to make choices and then carry them out. So what is involved in making a decision and carrying it out? Well, Kantians are you might think, well, making a decision is free. I can make any decision I want. So, but what the Kantian's going to argue is that actually all people who make decisions, who have multiple options, choose one and then carry them out, they all have one value that they hold together, right? That there's this non-optional thing that in order to make any decision, you have to hold. What is that value? Well, think about if I'm laying in bed and I'm trying to decide what to do with my life, and I'm like, well, I could be a firefighter, I could join the army, I could just get the most high-paying job I could and then raise a family, or maybe some smaller decision, like I should lose 30 pounds, or I'm just gonna eat as much as I want and enjoy life, and enjoy food is not worth constraining my diet. You know, I'm deciding between all these different options that are open to me. Whatever I choose, I say, all right, I'm going to become a firefighter. Now, let's say I don't care about my own decisions. I don't care about myself. I don't respect or value the things I've chosen for myself. I'm just going to lay in bed. I mean, I'm describing someone who's depressed, right? Someone who lays in bed is like, I'm going to become a firefighter. And they just lay there. Or they get up and they do other things. They go make breakfast, they sit down, they watch Friends, but they do nothing towards becoming a firefighter, right? Like once you've made a decision, you have to then be motivated to go take steps to like research becoming a firefighter, to start jogging, to maybe go and sign up for an expensive course to become a firefighter, right? So there's all these difficult things that you have to push yourself to do and be motivated to do simply because you said to yourself, I'm going to become a firefighter, right? And what it takes to be able to turn things into being valuable just by choosing them is respecting and valuing yourself, valuing your own free will and the choices you make for yourself, to treat yourself as if you have this power to bestow value, to make these things which before you made a choice, oh, they're all just equal, right? I could be a firefighter, I could work on Wall Street, I can move home and try taking over my dad's business as a barber. But whatever I choose, all of a sudden, it magically becomes this important thing for me to accomplish, right? What gets me out of bed and makes me follow through on the things I've chosen is seeing myself as having this ability to make things valuable simply by choosing them. And in fact, it's impossible for me to make choices unless I see myself as valuable and as being able to make things valuable in that way, right? Unless I see myself as having that power, then my choices will never motivate me. And then, therefore, I'll never actually make any choices. So, the claim the Kantian is making is that all free wills, all things that look at multiple options that they could choose, pick one of them, and then is thereby motivated to follow through and carry out those choices, all of those beings value themselves as free wills and value chosen ends simply because they chose them, to see themselves as having that sort of power. And so then the Kantian wants to say, therefore, when someone wants to say, anybody who makes choices which treats my free will or someone else's free will as worthless, as valueless, they're contradicting themselves, right? If I lie to somebody, here's why the Kantian is going to say it's wrong to lie to somebody. When I lie to you, I've got some ends that I've chosen, and I'm saying they're valuable because I've chose them, because I'm a free will and I've decided to do these things, therefore I care about them. You've chosen things. That does not make them valuable. Therefore, I'm going to lie to you to get around your choices to accomplish the things that I've chosen. The Kantian wants to say that's a contradiction. And the contradiction there is because you're saying free wills are important and they can make goals valuable and important to carry out simply by choosing them. But at the same time, I'm treating the other person's free choices as worthless. So I'm saying free wills are important and the choices they make are important, but also they're not important by respecting my choices, but by not respecting your choices. That's how the Kantian wants to get ethics. Now, you might say, well, why do I have to care about all free wills? Why do you might say, I buy you. I buy the argument, Kantian. I agree with you. In order to make free choices, you do have to value yourself and your own choices. But why do I have to value all free wills? That's a difficult argument, and the Kantians do make it. But what's interesting is on this topic, on suicide and euthanasia, it doesn't even come up, right? The Kantian might even say there's a stronger contradiction in cases of euthanasia than the other cases. It's easier to make that argument because when you're killing yourself, it's not, well, you say, well, in order to make a choice, like a choice to kill myself, to avoid pain, to escape suffering, I have to say, well, that's a valuable thing to do because I've chosen it and I'm valuable. And yet, I'm also treating myself as worthless, as something that can be sacrificed and thrown aside to accomplish a goal like escaping suffering, escaping pain, right? So the claim here is I'm treating my free will as both valuable and important to listen to, that doing the things that I choose for myself are important because I'm important, and yet then I choose things to do which assume that I'm actually worthless, right? That I can be destroyed and my free will can be destroyed and undermined and taken, and its ability to make any further choices to be completely eliminated simply to carry out one particular choice I've made. And that choice seems to hold both that my choices and my free will is valuable, that's why I make the choice and carry it out, and yet it also seems to treat my free will and my choices as worthless because what it accomplishes is, and what it's trying to do, escaping suffering, it accomplishes it by treating me as something that's disposable. My free will is something disposable and destroyable. So the Kantian wants to say, our free wills have this, and this is why the word dignity keeps coming up, right? It has this sort of special dignity. We make choices, and that bestows value on things. Hammers are only valuable insofar as they're useful for us in our choices. Becoming a firefighter is only valuable insofar as I choose to become a firefighter. I make these choices, and as a free will, I bestow them value, and they become valuable, but only sort of instrumentally, only because I've chosen them. The source of all that value is my free will. And the source of that value has to have, it's of a different level, of a different kind, of a different category of value than all the other things. Because the value of the free will is where everything else gets its value, and everything else would be valueless without the value of free will. So there's a contradiction when you try to accomplish some goal down here that you've chosen, and the way you accomplish it is by destroying a free will, right? It's saying, well, the problem is that this is only valuable if free will is valuable, but then suicide treats this thing as valueless, as destroying it in order to escape suffering. And so there's this way in which you get value that goes down to committing suicide to escape suffering from the value of free will, and then that choice ends up coming around and treating this thing as valueless, which means suicide would have to be valueless and escaping suffering would have to be valueless. So there's a contradiction in that it both treats free will as valuable in the first instance, which makes committing suicide and escaping suffering valuable, but committing suicide and escaping suffering in this case is valuable only if then treats free will and choice as valueless, and now I'm treating both free will and choice as valueless and valuable, and there's supposed to be a contradiction there. That's the gist of the Kantian argument, and that's why we talk a lot about dignity, is Kant makes this distinction between dignity and price. Everything else in the world has a price, in that it has a certain value that can be traded for other values, that can be rated according to each other. Sometimes you might sacrifice something of lower value for a lower price for a higher price. But all of that has its source in the original value, which is our choices. And so we treat that as having something we call a different sort of value. We call it dignity because it's not traded on the same scale, on the same level, on the same market as all the other things that have price. Dignity stands over and above all of those other values, and it's the source of all those other values. And so suicide seems to have this sort of way in which it treats something with a mere price as more important than something with a dignity. Escaping suffering which only has a mere price because its value depends on me choosing to escape suffering. And yet, to escape suffering, I'm now destroying my free will, which now seems to be treating escaping suffering as more valuable than free will itself, and yet free will itself is the source of the value of escaping suffering. I hope that helps.